My name is Laura Jane Rawlings. I am Chief Exec here at Youth Employment UK, and I'm going to be your chair for this next hour's webinar session. I'm delighted to be hosting this session in partnership with the Youth Futures Foundation, and we've got Sarah Young here who is going to be guiding us through a key element of today's webinar. So our partnership has been around for a very long time, actually, as long as Youth Futures Foundation has existed, and we are delighted as two of the kind of leading organisations in the youth employment space to be collaborating on a series of webinars this year. There are going to be 4 webinars, one a quarter, where we do a deep dive in the key moments and policy developments around the youth employment landscape. So we're going to be asking you at the end of this webinar that we get in touch with you so that we can keep you in tune and invited to the forthcoming webinars that we'll be hosting. So this one, Policy, Practice and Youth Voice, is going to really feature on the Youth Guarantee, of course. But before we get to that bit and the meaty bit, this is just my hosting reminder. Please, can you keep your microphones muted during the session? There is nothing more off-putting than your Amazon arrivals or dogs barking to our speakers, delightful as they both are. But your cameras are very welcome to stay on. We love to see the faces and the engagement. We have got our chat feature open, as you can see. We're hearing from everybody, from the organisations that they're from and also their favourite thing that they're looking forward to this week. So do use the chat function, do network with each other. Georgia Williamson from Youth Employment UK is our expert webinar lead today, and will pick up any technical queries that you have. She'll also share any links in the chat that are being mentioned as they happen. The webinar will be recorded and will be shared, so you'll be able to share this and the presentation that is included. So you can sit back and relax, because we'll take the notes and share with you those notes and the webinar itself after this. I think that is it from a housekeeping perspective. So this is what the agenda looks like. I'm shortly going to hand over to the brilliant Sarah Young, who'll talk to us about the Youth Employment Challenge and the opportunity that now lies ahead. Then we're going to hear from the absolutely brilliant Emily Farr, who is one of the policy leads at DWP, who's been working tirelessly on the Youth Guarantee policy that she'll be talking about. Then the fabulous Beth Slatherley from Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority will have the absolute pleasure of chairing their Youth Guarantee Programme Board. Beth's going to talk about what we're doing there at CPCA and their Youth Guarantee delivery. And hopefully we'll hear from Georgia and Eva from the youth voice perspective of those young people in and around the Cambridge Combined Authority area. I will then open up to Q&A. So that's the moment that I want you to ask all your big questions to any of our speakers. We'll have 15 minutes for that before we wrap up and close. So without further ado, as you continue to introduce yourselves, which I love, I'm going to hand over to Sarah Young, partner of mine and Director of Policy and External Affairs at Youth Futures Foundation. Sarah.
Thanks so much, LJ, and amazing to see we're over the 100 mark. And I think people are still tipping in. But yes, so I'm just going to give you a bit of an outline to set us up on the sort of the problem, why it's happening, and the opportunity of tackling this. So it's important to say, first of all, that the UK has a long-term stubborn challenge with high numbers of young people not being in education, employment and training. But we have been seeing that growing in the last few years. Today, unfortunately, we have 957,000 young people not earning or learning. So that's equivalent of 1 in 8 young people. And we have seen that issue getting worse. So it's up 15% just in the last 3 years alone. And the character of this challenge is quite different to challenges that we've seen in previous decades. If we compare it to the 2008 financial crisis, what we saw there were huge numbers of young people unemployed, but young people were unemployed and were actively searching and looking for work. Whereas today, what we see is a bigger amount of this number is made up of young people who are inactive. So young people who aren't necessarily actively looking for work and are not necessarily engaged in that support system. So we have a huge challenge here where it's both about giving young people a better support offer, but also finding better ways to engage them in that offer. If we go to the next slide, LJ. And what's really, really key is peeling back the numbers, because behind these numbers are, of course, real young people with real individual stories. And what we know is where you live matters hugely. We see huge regional inequality, which is why things like the Trailblazers are really important and great. We'll be getting that regional perspective today. But for example, if you're in the Northeast, if you're in Yorkshire and the Humber, if you're in the East Midlands, for example, the NEET rates are much higher. You're unfortunately more likely to be out of work or learning. And of course, characteristics matter. Now, what you've got here is a bit of a complicated diagram, but it's complicated on purpose. It's actually showing what a journey can look like for a young person throughout the system. And as you can see, it's complicated, and often to a young person that can feel really, really overwhelming. So, for example, just to show you sort of the inequity, if you have special educational needs, you are almost twice as likely to not be earning or learning as someone that doesn't have those needs. If you are care experienced, that goes up to 3.5 times more likely to be NEET. Or if, for example, you don't have things like a level 2 qualification, if perhaps you're justice experienced, or if you're from a particular ethnic group, we see your likelihood of becoming NEET to be higher, unfortunately. And what we also know is that those risk factors multiply, they often overlap, which can make it even more complex, which tells us something about the need for public policy to be quite sophisticated to think about this issue. And just wanted to say a few things. The problem is it's for a multitude of reasons, but it's worth, I think, highlighting 3 sort of macro headwinds at this point that we see intensifying the problem. So the first is that we see ill health being a key driver of the current NEET challenge, and within that, it is unfortunately growing numbers of growing occurrence of mental ill health that is driving that number, and we know that that's a huge driver of young people not feeling that they can be in earning or learning. The second thing is we have seen a huge decline in the number of apprenticeships, so they have dropped by 1/3 in the last sort of decade. And the reason that's important is because apprenticeships are traditionally a really excellent route, a really excellent entry-level route for young people. We know that the evidence tells us that they can be one of the most impactful ways that young people can get onto a good career. But unfortunately, we've seen those numbers drop in the last decade. And then the final thing I'd just say at the moment is that we're currently in a very challenging labour market. We know that when the economy gets hit, that unfortunately young people often suffer first, because we know that young people are in sectors which can be vulnerable, often overrepresented in the gig economy, and of course have less experience than some of their older worker counterparts. And at the moment, we know employers are facing lots of changes as well. So huge things to bear in mind. And we've also seen, less investment again over the last decade in general sort of wider employment supports. But we do have a huge opportunity now with the direction of public policy, I think, through the Youth Guarantee, through the Trailblazers, and be great to hear from Emily and Beth on that and where that public policy can take us. But I just want to move to the final slide now, just to put it into perspective for attendees on, like, why does this really matter? Now, it goes without saying that we have a moral obligation. We know that it's an absolute tragedy for young people not to give them these opportunities. We know it can have a huge impact, a huge scarring impact on young people, can have consequences for them for the rest of their lives, for their earning outcomes, from their health and happiness outcomes. And we obviously know that young people are a part of our society too. When they lose out, when they fail, we all lose out. When they win, we all win. But I just wanted to highlight here the huge economic waste that we have if we don't take this problem seriously. Now, if we look at our European counterparts and we look at countries that have done this much better than us, we always take the Netherlands as a key example. So the Netherlands have worked really hard over 2 decades to get their NEET rate down to 1 in 20 young people. So 1 in 20 compared to our 1 in 8. Now, if we could do as they have done, if we could really focus on this and match their rates, that would be worth £86 billion to our economy, and crucially would mean over 500,000 more young people would be earning and learning. So that would half the NEET rate. So the challenge is great, but the prize is absolutely worth it. Back to you, LJ.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. That figure is so stark. That's the one that's going up on my LinkedIn straight after this webinar today, I think. Right. Okay. Let's move on to the brilliant Emily from the Department for Work and Pensions. Emily, I'm just going to hand over to you and I will click through your slides as you tell me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's good to be here and thank you for having me. For those I haven't met, my name is Emily. Just a quick overview now of the sort of current policy landscape, particularly obviously from a DWP, Department for Work and Pensions perspective, and the government's approach to the rising NEET issue. But the main thing I just want to start off with saying that this government has sort of genuinely really stepped up the focus and investment on young people, with more than £1.5 billion of investment announced for young people's employment, and sort of trying to bring down the NEET rated budget, and an additional £1 billion just 2 weeks ago following the spring statement. So I'll give a bit of an overview of what that investment's going to go towards, and then happy to take Q&A when we've got the Q&A session at the end. If you'd like to click to the next slide, please. I won't spend too long on this slide because obviously Sarah's just sort of set out a lot of this information, but I think it's helpful to see how the government is framing this issue. And our headline, which Sarah also covered, is that we've got nearly 1 million young people who are not in educational employment or training, and this figure is continuing to grow. So there are around 366,000 unemployed and 580,000 inactive 16 to 24-year-olds. About 2/3 are on universal credit, and about 1/3 are the HIDs that aren't known to the system. As Sarah set out, there's no single cause of being NEET. There's overlapping risk factors and significant regional variations that make this a slightly more complicated picture. And in addition, we're also facing a demographic bulge in the coming years, which means that there will be more young people entering the labour market. So even to maintain the NEET rate at the current level would require an additional 590,000 young people to be participating in education, employment or training in 2030, compared to volumes in January to March 2025, which I always think is quite a staggering stat. Because the drivers of being NEET cut across education, skills, health, employment services, among other factors, that's sort of our rationale for a single youth guarantee that is jointly owned by Department for Education and Department for Work and Pensions, but working closely with other departments across government. So that particularly includes DCMS, Digital Culture, Media, Sport, on the National Youth Strategy, which was published in December last year, and includes the Youth Guarantee under Action 5, which is good work, with the ambition to provide better education, guidance, training, and support for young people to get a great job. And there's a much wider age range for that strategy as well. It goes more into childhood, whereas we in Department for Work and Pensions are focusing primarily on the age 16 to 24 group. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is an updated version of a slide which some of you might have seen before. It sets out how we're investing the £2.5 billion, which I mentioned earlier, in the Youth Guarantee to support young people to earn and learn, and to make sure that they get the right support at the right time. So the key thing here is that the Youth Guarantee really is an umbrella term, but it has three main pillars here. So providing the right support for young people, increasing skills and experience so that they're ready for work, and then supporting employers to create real opportunities for those who are work ready to go into. We've already started delivering the Youth Guarantee, for example, through delivery of the 8 Youth Guarantee Trailblazers in England, which of course includes Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, backed by 90 million of funding across all 8 Trailblazers. And those are particularly finding innovative ways to reach young people outside the benefit system. And then there is, of course, also existing offers through job centres for young people, there's youth hubs, but we're sort of bringing this together and with a much increased package of funding behind it. So the first pillar here is providing the right support. We are strengthening the support available through youth hubs. We're increasing the coverage of those to over 360 areas across GB, so all local areas, so that more young people can access joined up employment, skills and wellbeing support in their communities. And that includes access to mental health services, and that's a sort of open door to anyone, so not just those who are on universal credit. Alongside this, we're also rolling out the Youth Guarantee Gateway. So that provides intensive support for young people on universal credit. That's essentially an extra meeting in their job centre journey at week 13 of their claim. And it's all about kind of that intervention, helping young people to engage quickly when they're in the job centre, build confidence and move towards work or training before they sort of veer into the long-term unemployment, where there's much more likely to be kind of significant long-term impacts on them. We're also, as I mentioned, testing the trailblazers in selected mayoral areas, giving local leaders greater accountability and flexibility to tailor support to what works locally. And together, these measures help create a more sort of integrated GB-wide system of support for young people. The second pillar here is increasing skills and experience. So we know that work experience and high quality training are really key stepping stones into sustained employment. And that's why we're investing heavily in opportunities that help young people to gain the skills that employers need. So we have invested in delivering 150,000 additional work experience placements, which will give young people the chance to build confidence, develop workplace skills, and improve their employability, helping to get them to that work-ready place. We're also expanding sector-based training. So there's an additional, we're funding an additional 145,000 sector-based work academy programs, or SWAPs, which are designed with employers and targeted at specific sectors with real demand. At the same time, we're making apprenticeships more accessible and more flexible. We've announced just 2 weeks ago the apprenticeship incentives for small and medium-sized enterprise employers, alongside fully funded training to support more young people aged 16 to 24 into high-quality apprenticeship opportunities. And we're also expanding foundation apprenticeships for 16 to 21-year-olds, so entry-level paid roles that combine work with training, including new sectors such as retail and hospitality, and additional financial incentives for employers to support the take-up of these. Together, the focus, as I say, is sort of here is really on those cross-sector opportunities for young people to gain skills, gain experience, and help move them towards a work-ready place. Thirdly, we are supporting employers to hire young people. So we're backing employers to create real jobs, not just placements. So through the Youth Jobs Grant, which is a £3,000 hiring incentive for employers who hire young people aged 18 to 24 who've been out of work for more than 6 months, and also through the Jobs Guarantee, which is for young people aged 18 to 24 who've been unemployed for 18 months or more, providing them access to a real job. And that will have national rollout from autumn 2026, following the phase 1, which is in 6 specific areas. And this expanded age range, it was previously 18 to 21, which you may have seen. And 2 weeks ago, we announced the expanded age range of 18 to 24 for the Jobs Guarantee. We're also continuing to reduce costs for employers through employer national insurance contributions relief, with zero employer NICs for employees under 21 and apprentices under 25. So taken all together, as I say, the Youth Guarantee is the umbrella term. Taken together, this approach is supposed to really kind of upskill young people and also ensure that there's real opportunities for those who are job ready, while making it easier and more attractive for employers to hire young people. And the outcome that we're focusing on is high youth employment, stronger progression into work, and a system which gives every young person the opportunity to earn and learn, and ultimately bringing down the NEET rate. If we could click to the next slide, please. I don't know, Paddy, if you wanted to have a question specifically on that slide, or if that one's for the Q&A at the end.
We do have a Q&A at the end, Paddy, so we'll come back to your question at the end in the Q&A section, if that's okay. Let's carry on, Emily, please.
Thanks. Okay, so this is my last slide, and I won't dwell on this, but it's really just to highlight that we're sort of really looking to employers and partners to work with the government on the Youth Guarantee. It's obviously a big problem and not one that we can solve alone. So we have a really clear ask that we're putting out to employers and stakeholders to help to deliver the Youth Guarantee. It's set out here on the slide. I won't go through each individual point, but we're delivering this message to employers, particularly through a series of sectoral roundtables throughout the year. And we've also drafted an employer briefing paper, which sets out these asks, and we're starting to share this more widely with employers. So I can perhaps share a copy to go round with slides afterwards, but if anyone particularly wants to see it, then drop me a note in the chat. But really, we're asking employers and partners to help deliver the support to young people, create those opportunities. You know, we can't create the work experience, the SWAPs, those training opportunities without employers being on board. And that's why we're offering those incentives as well to increase the availability of those opportunities. This is a bit of a sort of whistle-stop tour through the Youth Guarantee, but there's obviously lots of different elements to this, and it is a real kind of cross-government effort, sorry. And it's worth mentioning as well, obviously, the policy direction for the Youth Guarantee will link closely with wider labour market policy thinking, particularly the Milburn Review into Young People and Work. Sarah highlighted that health conditions, mental health has been a particular factor in the rising NEET rate, and that's something that the Milburn Review is having, has a particular focus on, and was one of the drivers for setting up the review. But that's very much an independent review that will report later this year. So we as government will obviously very much be focusing on that. We expect later in the year, but there's a huge amount of focus on this with this government, and the amount of investment that's gone into this, I think, really shows that. But as a department, we've really kind of stepped up. There's a lot bigger team even sort of working behind this, and it's as LJ said, it's been busy, but it's been really good, and it's great to have everyone on the call engaging. So very happy to take Q&A during the session later on. Otherwise, drop questions in the chat, and thank you for listening.
Amazing, Emily, brilliant job. And I will say it again, the DWP have kind of been outstanding in the pace and the thinking that's gone behind this, but also the level of collaboration with the sector, in particular the Youth Employment Group, which both Youth Futures and Youth Employment UK chair. We're meeting DWP sometimes what feels like twice a week, and then sometimes we get a bit of a break. But it's been great. So thank you, Emily. We will come to questions. There are some already in the chat. We'll pick them up as we go through, but if you want to answer any directly, Emily, while we're hearing from CPCA, please feel free to do so if they talk to your slides in particular. And speaking of CPCA, brilliant, Beth. What does this really mean on the ground? Walk us through a trailblazer at its best, if you would be so kind.
Right, hello everybody. So I'm the programme lead for the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. LJ's our fabulous chair of our programme board. So I'm just going to run through kind of what we've done locally, bearing in mind I think there's a different flavour across all 8 of the Trailblazers. I started off with what is the Youth Guarantee, unaware of kind of whether anybody's kind of knowledge levels and what they were at. But I think we've had a fairly good rundown now, so I won't kind of go into too much detail. But basically, we're there for a test and learn approach. We've spent a year kind of trying to figure out what we think the Youth Guarantee looks like within our region. We've tried some stuff out, some stuff's worked, some stuff hasn't. But I'm just going to give you kind of a really quick rundown of kind of like what we did in year 1. But I'm also then just going to have a very quick summary of kind of what year 2 looks like in response to year 1. LJ, if you want to move me on. So this was our starting place. This was established by sort of programme board level, all the people who've been working in this space for a long time. This is the policy framework. So basically, the vision being that all young people 18 to 21 will have access to training and employment support, but also that will strengthen support for the 16 and 17-year-olds, so that preventative element as well. And these were kind of the sort of 9 key elements that we were going to kind of focus our delivery planning on. So this was kind of the starting block almost of the Youth Guarantee and CPCA. If you move me on again, please, LJ. So this is kind of what we invested in year 1. So we increased tracking and monitoring. That seemed to be the first and the most logical place for us to start. Obviously, 16 to 18, there's statutory tracking out there for NEET young people. We extended that up to 21, working with our local authorities. We also built capacity within these teams to kind of triage these young people and find out kind of what their needs were, and then kind of signpost them into provision that will support their kind of movement forward. We also funded some Tiger Pass. So this is within our region. It's a £1 bus fare. So all of our young people up to the age of 25 can access that for free. Just trying to open up, obviously, being a very rural area, transport's a big issue where we are. Digital infrastructure was another kind of element that we wanted to kind of nail. So the idea of kind of open and free access to young people from their bedrooms. So we worked actually with Youth Employment UK on some fantastic digital assets. So we've got the Digital Gateway that kind of is our sort of central library hub where all of our Youth Guarantee kind of provision will sit. And we also have something called the Young Professionals course, which is kind of a staged course for young people to kind of build employability skills from their PC at home. And then we've got some virtual work experience in there as well. We also collaborated with Quell and with Kooth. We've got the Quell platform. Sarah and Emily mentioned it, mental health. It's been seen, we did the youth census for our locale, and, mental health is a significant barrier for the young people living in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So we invested some sort of money in some digital assets for that. We also expanded on kind of the UK SPF idea of kind of careers guidance and a generalised careers guidance for this cohort. So we placed, I think there was 3 locations, and that was very much supporting young people to apply for jobs, CVs, that kind of general employability support. But we also opened the Youth Hub in Peterborough. Now, this was a really big piece of work, and is that kind of wraparound support hub where we have JCP in there, We have housing associations, we have Mind, we've employed a mental health worker to sit in there. So within that youth hub, we have kind of a multidisciplinary approach, you know, things like AI, careers guidance in there. We have an apprentice who triages the young people. So that's that very kind of supportive package of things you can get in one place within the youth hub, which is obviously what Emily was just mentioned earlier. Now, if you move it on again, LJ, within CPCA, LJ, thank you. Within BCA, we also have incentives around apprenticeships and internships. Obviously, this is being taken by the DWP going into year 2. So this is something we're going to have to potentially look at going into year 2, because obviously we have a kind of a sort of comparable offer currently. But obviously we saw that this was also a necessary piece of work. Employer appetite is quite low. So we were kind of, you know, looking at ways of trying to incentivize them to take young people on. And this is kind of what we did within CPCA. Now, the final kind of huge piece of work that we did, LJ, if you move me on again, was we did this thing called the interventions funding. So we had one of the big pieces of work, and what we feel very passionately about in CPCA is the idea of place-based working, working with young people where they are, engaging with them in a way that they feel comfortable. So we put out 1.5 million pot and basically said, come on, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, what we've got, you know, we want you to address the issues that's within our policy framework. What do you have out there that can support these young people? And these were 20 providers that came to the front and basically offered up a myriad of incredibly different and all-encompassing different kinds of provision. It was a really interesting experience. You know, we've got, you know, Living Sport with care experienced young people. We have Turtle Dove that sort of tailored their provision towards young mothers. We had IEG who kind of skilled up community navigators who were people like barbers and personal trainers in kind of advice and guidance around careers. There was a huge myriad of different kinds of provision. And basically, we kind of spread it across the region. Then we had our triage kind of at the bottom here, and these are the kind of things that our young people were placed in. And that's kind of how year 1 rolled out. If you move me on one more time, I think this might be the last slide actually. So this is just a little snapshot of some of the kind of images of some of the work that we did. Across the 30 projects, we engaged with 638 young people over actually what ended up being quite a short period of time because of issues with contracting and, you know, the usual kind of administrative elements of trying to deliver this kind of work. And this doesn't include light touch, things like people just walking into the youth hub. So that was kind of like a really, really quick, very quick summary of kind of what CPCA year 1 looked like. But I'm just going to really motor, LJ, am I all right for another minute? Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to motor through what we learned, because this is kind of moving into year 2. Obviously, we're trying to kind of solidify some of this, kind of, you know, take that test and learn approach and kind of make it a bit more kind of systematic and you know, a bit more tangible for our young people. So tracking works, so we're extending that. That piece of work within the local authorities is a really positive thing. They're out there, they know where these young people are and they're finding them. And if we're looking at those kind of hidden needs, you know, we've got quite a solid success rate of them finding young people, you know, through, you know, youth outreach and that kind of stuff. So that's a really solid piece of work. One of the big issues we had in year 1 is that our internships and apprenticeships, we had very small uptake. It was very disappointing. But, and this is what we found anecdotally across all our partners, is that it's not that there's no appetite for it. Our young people want it, and quite a lot of our employers want it as well. So in year 2, what we've done is we've invested in Apprentigo, which is a centralised apprenticeship platform that basically scrapes for apprenticeship opportunities. And it's an AI-based kind of digital platform that allows a young person to develop a CV, apply for apprenticeships online. The employers are on there so they can respond, and basically that whole lifetime of that application goes through that platform. So we're kind of supporting at that base level. Again, we're continuing with our incentives for employers. We've increased those, so there's actually more there. So we're trying to kind of push up and push down. We're trying to make it easier for young people and then more incentivized for employers, and trying to kind of create the demand. We know there is demand and it's just a case of trying to kind of galvanize it somehow. The other kind of theme that we found is that a lot of young people were going into work and employment opportunities and then dropping out due to lack of support at that point. So within the careers guidance that we're procuring again, so this kind of piece of work, which is just very much support, currently run by Read in Partnership, it's out for procurement again this year, is we're extending that support for 4 weeks. So when a young person gets a job or goes into training, they'll have a support coach for 4 weeks for that initial period of, how do I fill in my PAY slip? How do, they've asked me this question, I don't know what this means, so we're trying to kind of find out where those drop-offs are and kind of stretch our provision to kind of fill those holes, basically. The other big piece of work we found is that within our place-based working, what we found was that a lot of our providers were naturally creating pathways together. So this was outside of our kind of remit or our design, but we were having people like Constructed Pathways, we're doing tasters for construction, and they were linking with Y2KO, who did enterprise, and we're teaching them how to develop businesses and things like that. And we had these pathways that were naturally kind of developing. So for year 2, what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and embrace that and provide our young people with not just opportunities all the way through the year, but opportunities that suit where they are on their journey, but also have our partners speak to each other so that there's this, the Youth Guarantee, the Trailblazer within CPCA will be referral based very heavily. And the idea is that they move along that neat to eats journey in a very supported, sustained way by wraparound support, excellent workers who are engaging really well with them, and they know who they are. And that's kind of the fundamentals. And then finally, last thing is we're developing a CRM. So the idea is that a young person's details will be taken to be on the Youth Guarantee, but within the CRM, they can see all the different opportunities. They can be registered on the Youth Guarantee, and then they can access all of the different things that they potentially need, want, or require. We can step into work, well, connect to work. So the idea is just we're trying to become more of the ecosystem. Within CPCA, we're trying to embrace what's there already. One front door. It keeps being said, but it should be one front door for our young people. They don't care where the funding comes from. We just get it. We get it because we need it and because there's somebody there to provide it. That's me, LJ, I think. Feel free.
Amazing. Thank you, Beth. So good. And we've learned so much. So we could talk about it all day long, but don't have the time. So I'm just going to invite Eva in to talk about what the Youth Voice Board has been working on as part of the CPCA project. Eva, are you with us?
Yes, hi LJ, and Georgia, who's actually part of the Youth Employment Forum, is here on the call too. Can you hear us, Georgia? Georgia, can you hear us? I'll explain a little bit about what the Youth Employment Forum is just before we get started. I know Georgia is on the call, so we'll try and figure out the tech. But CPCA in our Youth Guarantee Trailblazer, we have done a lot of work to work with young people to develop our programme. And the Youth Employment Forum, you can see their logo down on the bottom. They are a team of young people aged 16 to 26 who have all themselves faced barriers to education and employment. And they've been meeting once a month over the past year to bounce ideas off with us and kind of give feedback on ideas as they develop. Georgia just told me it's not letting her unmute. So, Georgia, do you want to type some of your thoughts in the chat about kind of your experiences? And I'll talk a bit through this slide while we try and get it sorted. And I wonder if anyone on the Youth Employment UK site can figure out why she might not be able to unmute.
Yes, our Georgia will do that, but we'll pick up the technical things. Thanks, Eva.
Coolio, and hang in there, my Georgia, we'll figure it out. So on the slide here, we ran an event last month, which was a bit of a Youth Voice Summit to bring together different young people who had participated in our Trailblazer over the past year to talk about some of the key barriers the Youth Forum identified young people have been facing, those being issues with the job search process itself, so young people who are feeling ready for work but they're having a hard time actually getting a job, transport barriers and mental health barriers. And you can see on the screen some of those issues that have been coming up, but what we wanted to look at was not what problems young people were facing, but kind of the why, how, where, because we have some amazing data out there about what barriers young people face, but we don't always understand kind of from their perspective and their lived experience why those issues occur. So the headlines of what we found was that the barriers to actually getting a job are really mixed, but some of the key things that kept coming up were qualifications. So if young people haven't got their English and maths GCSE, that really holds them back, and they could have missed out on those qualifications for any number of reasons. Issues with experience: you can't get a job because you don't have experience, but you can't get experience because you can't get a job. It's a cyclical occurrence. Issues with housing, and not having those kind of basic stable needs met in your life, where you're not going to be thinking about getting a job if you don't know where you're going to be staying at the end of the week. So that's a big issue. Balancing caring responsibilities, young people with disabilities and mental health conditions, and also past convictions. So it's a real breadth of things that pose barriers to our young people, not just the fact that they might not have employability skills, as you've heard from the other speakers today. Public transport is a massive issue because in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough we're very rural, and there are parts of the region that might get a bus once a day, and even when that bus does come, it's a bit young people's safety isn't always guaranteed, especially young people from marginalised communities, young people from particular ethnic backgrounds, or young people from the LGBTQ community have reported particular issues with safety on public transport, and it's a massive postcode lottery. Some young people are really well connected, others really aren't. And last but not least, around mental health, we all know mental health is a massive piece in this puzzle. But what came up amongst a lot of young people who might not identify as struggling with their mental health, or have a diagnosed mental health challenge, is that they experience anxiety about being judged in the workplace. And we reached the conclusion that this is something that almost all young people experience, but lots of adults might not relate to that in terms of turning up on your first day of work. Yeah, you're a little bit nervous, but are you spending all day completely paranoid about what other people think of you and whether you've made a good impression? And beyond a healthy professional wanting to do well, that's the level of anxiety young people are experiencing. But work can actually help with this if it's a good job that provides stability, it provides an income, it provides a sense of purpose, and it provides the welcoming team. That can really help with that anxiety. So it's a bit of a tricky one where anxiety is a barrier to the workplace, but also the workplace can be a bit of an antidote to that and help build confidence. So it's really important that we help young people get that first foot in the door. And like I said, all of this came from young people who have been through the Youth Guarantee this year, so we're really committed to co-producing our offer with them. Georgia, I wonder whether you can unmute and whether you figured out how to do that, or if you want to pop anything in the chat.
It looks like Georgia's mic is open. So, Georgia, can we hear you now? Might be something Georgia's end, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it might be an issue with the mic. That's okay. Oh, Georgia's popped something in the chat. Georgia, hi, I'm a sessional youth support worker from St Neots Town Council. I've had a lot of barriers to working because I have a lot of disabilities and need extra support, and a lot of employers don't give us a chance. And Georgia and I had a bit of a chat on Saturday when we were prepping for this session about the way that compounds throughout your life. I think the story she would have told, could she join us, was about how if you have disabilities or mental health difficulties, or you have things going on in your family, it impacts your experience of school. You can't attend school, you can't get the most out of school, you can't get the qualifications you need. You might have to move around a lot, which means that you're not going to the same school for any extended period of time. And then you leave school, and if for whatever reason you can't continue living with your family, you've then got insecurity in terms of where you're living, and then you've got to fight the health system to get the correct diagnosis, and then you've got to communicate that to employers. We've had lots of chats about some of these issues, and it's a massive shame that Georgia hasn't been able to unmute today, but yeah, if you want to have further chats about Youth Voice, please do get in touch with us. We're more than willing to work with other organisations who want to work with young people, and we've got some really skilled young people on our team who can be excellent mentors for that. Thank you, Georgia, for trying, and thank you, LJ, for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Eva. And sorry, Georgia, I'm not sure what the technical problem is there, but it is great to have you and have your support for the Youth Forum across CPCA. And I guess that just sort of really highlights how important the investment has been from government to the regional areas so that they can test the different intervention that will work for young people. I think what we've certainly seen across Cambridge and Peterborough is a lack of investment over the previous years. So the stimulation that this funding is being kind of given and being allowed to do is really creating new and different opportunities for young people based on their individual needs and challenges. So it's been a hugely important project to be part of and to sort of stimulate that opportunity. Well, we are going to now take questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see everybody's faces. Excellent stuff. And what I will do, there's been a lot of questions in the chat, so thank you to everybody and thank you for all of your engagement. I guess I'll pick out Gavin's question first. Parents and families are really instrumental when it comes to supporting young people on their journey to work. Parents and families, of course, where they exist around a young person. We shouldn't assume all young people have that familiar support. But in the case that there are parents and family members influencing, what are we seeing that's working either at a local level to engage parents and family members, or Emily, from a national perspective, are there plans on what government can do to help parents and family carers support young people through the Youth Guarantee? So I want Beth and Emily to kind of pick up on that local point, but also the national point. Emily, have we got anything coming in the Youth Guarantee around that?
So the Youth Guarantee focuses primarily on, it's the job centre support, from our DWP perspective, at least it's, the opportunities and then the job centre support for that young person. So to be honest, I feel that the offer is mainly targeted at the individual. We don't, while we consider as part of the drivers and the sort of rationale behind the NEET rate, that we've got people with different family backgrounds and different sort of experiences, I guess, in those kind of teenage years in particular with their education and skills. And we consider that as part of the prevention element of the Youth Guarantee. In the more sort of DWP focused element, which is the support to actually get them those skills later on and get them into a job, we are focusing more on the individual than on the parents and families. But I think from the Department for Education perspective, which is more on that NEET prevention sort of age 16 to 19 group, they're looking a bit more at the backgrounds and the context that someone is in at that point, because it definitely factors into the drivers of the NEET rate and someone's circumstances. But when we're looking more at the solution, we do tend to focus more on the individual. But it's an interesting question. I'd be interested to hear, so what's working at the local level and whether there's an opportunity there that we should be feeding that thinking in more.
Thanks. So at local level, Beth, are we engaging parents and carers across CPCA?
I think it's very anecdotal, because obviously I speak to the providers quite a lot about kind of their delivery and stuff like that. And I think we do have parents largely that do engage and bring their young people down and will support them through that. But I think generally, if we're looking at hidden needs, which, a vast number of our young people are not receiving universal credit. So I would wager that a lot of them are technically hidden needs and not engaging in any other service. Most of them are very solo creatures and are dealing with this journey on their own. Now, I'm not saying that's universally true, but I think with a lot of the young people that we're dealing with, we're still ringing them to get them up in the morning, and that would suggest that the parental influence is limited there. So I don't know whether we're missing a trick potentially with engaging within more parents and carers, but it's not something I've seen very commonly across our provision that we've had parents involved.
Yeah, I think it is definitely worth a conversation and thinking about, for sure. Glenn, I can see Emily has answered your question about the replacement of SPF funding, but I just thought I'd invite you just to share kind of why you asked the question, what you're seeing on the ground. If you are able to come off mute, I think it's an important sort of moment. Hi, Glenn.
Sorry, just get everything set up. So morning everybody. So Glenn Smales from Coventry City Council. I haven't seen the response in the chat, so I'll look at that. So I missed that. But the reason I asked the question is for several years in Coventry, we've run a successful job shop hub and spoke model, which I know is very much the model that we're looking towards moving forward. So that multi-agency hub, integration of DWP, National Careers Service, council services with a lot of voluntary sector input, But the funding for that model has very much been ESF, and then it moved into UK SPF, and there hasn't to date been much direct DWP funding, whilst we have had a youth hub and an adult hub as part of that space, particularly obviously focusing this conversation on youth employment and youth unemployment. Sorry, we haven't had that direct DWP funding. So the concern moving forward is unless we can resolve that, we're going to struggle to continue to fund that multi-agency hub approach. And I think that's key, we find in Coventry, to engage in some of the hardest to reach young people. Now, they can be people that are directly engaged in DWP services, and we're providing that additionality, wraparound, intensive employment support linked to employers and bringing everything together in partnership with DWP. But it's also a lot of young people that are not yet claiming benefits. They're recently NEET, as well. So there's a lot of that.
Okay.
So really, that's about cutting the flow off into young people employment benefits. So really, what we're to support, and very much UK SPF was providing that, and the concern is how do we fund that moving forward, bearing in mind local authority budgets hikes as well.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. And I think I'd just broaden the question a little bit and then give Emily a chance to come back. In all of the wisdom over the years, we've had lots of different funding models going into places to support youth unemployment, funding that will go direct to the VCS sector or into job centres to be able to kind of organise that local support. The Youth Guarantee Trailblazer money, the 90 million that's gone into the 8 areas, has clearly stimulated new opportunity and breaking down some of those barriers. But there are not plans, as far as I can see, to expand that type of investment to areas outside of the 8, or actually beyond year 2, fund even the 8 to continue what they've already started to do. Does government have a view yet on where money will come for that systemic change? It's one thing to fund incentives for employers, but actually it's the youth organisations, the specialist support organisations that need funding to do the wraparound support. How do we see that growing in the years to come?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, definitely with the Trailblazer funding that you mentioned, the Trailblazers, that sort of test and learn element of the Youth Guarantee. So we are really sort of drawing learning from those, and there will be an evaluation of the Trailblazers so that we can make sure that we sort of roll out those learnings, which will be part of the full Youth Guarantee. So that sort of 2.5 billion of funding. In terms of the funding for specific organisations, I mean, some of that will come through, for example, the Jobs Guarantee, like there is, I think it's 2,500, although I need to double check that, of wraparound support funding for each individual on the scheme. So it will be up to the delivery partners where that funding goes. That's not necessarily DWP's decision. And we want to make sure that, delivery partners in different areas are able to access that. But with the UK SPF funding specifically, as I popped in my message, that is ending this March and will be replaced by several new, more targeted funds. So would suggest, Glenn, do have a look at the link, and if you've got more questions on that specifically, then I'm happy to, my email hopefully is on here, I can pop it in the chat, so do reach out.
Amazing, excellent. Okay, it's amazing and excellent. Well put answer. I'm not sure it's an amazing and excellent policy. Just to be clear, don't want to confuse the two things. I think Dan Porter, welcome to the world of early careers. It would be amazing if you want to come off mute and ask your question as an employer in the room. Oh, we can't hear you, Dan. Oh no, can't hear you. Don't know whether we've got your mic coming through. No, can't hear him. But it was going to be brilliant, is what I know. So I guess to answer to Dan's question, perhaps while he's trying to find the different button, how can someone stepping into this role really understand what they can do to support the government policy and direction, Emily? We had a couple of asks in the slide deck, but I guess really it's about how can employers engage with that? If they want to take one of those incentives with the Youth Guarantee, who do they need to even talk to? Is that where you want them to start making relationships with the local authority, the combined authority, Dan, is that working for you? No. Okay, I'm just going to paraphrase for you. So Emily, how do employers actually access the incentives?
That's a very good question. There's different ways to sort of, build the relationship between, different branches of government, but DWP and, and yourselves, depending on sort of which area that you're interested in getting involved in and the sort of scale of that. I will put in the chat our sort of main Youth Guarantee mailbox, and as a complete starting point, that's probably the best place to direct your questions, and then we can either pick up a conversation ourselves or pass you on to the right place. But sort of through job centres, there is a kind of tailored recruitment service that employers can get involved in, and that will help employers to work with the job centre to fill vacancies. So that includes support with job descriptions and speeding up recruitment and promotion of vacancies on locally and online, the use of job centre space for interviewing and invitations to recruitment events, access to free online job site, which is our free online job site, which is Find a Job, and also expert advice from a recruitment manager in our strategic relationship team at DWP. And that strategic relationship team is probably the main catch-all for kind of having that relationship, understanding how to access the different support offers. But as I said, I think the simplest thing is if I pop the Youth Guarantee mailbox in the chat, and if anyone wants to reach out to that with any questions, then we'll direct you to the right place. Okay,
thanks, Emily. And probably what I should add and echo here is that actually connections with your local job centres are really important. We see lots of employers doing great work with schools and colleges, which is vital to catch those young people early in the kind of journey to employment. But we have, as Sarah says, nearly 1 million young people who are NEET. It is likely that you're most likely to catch those young people through a job centre or through the local authority who are tracking and working with NEET provision, or indeed with those local brilliant youth organisations and specialist charities that might work with particular groups of young people. So we encourage employers to really understand who is working in and around their network and their community to make sure that you're building those relationships. It's not just schools and colleges, but they're vital. It is also job centres and the youth organisations and the local authority that will be able to help you. And of course, at Youth Employment UK, we provide membership to employers to help them think about what good practice looks like when you are then doing that engagement, and help you to track and monitor the work that you're doing with young people. So do have a look at the membership with Youth Employment UK as part of that. Sarah, I'm just going to pick up one of, I think, the brilliantly asked question earlier on, which was about what the Netherlands are doing. And I can see someone has responded with a link to a study from YFF. But I just wonder if, as we come to kind of drawing a bit of a close to the Q&A, what you would highlight as some of that really important sort of national systemic practice that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll highlight 3 things quickly. So the first is that they have a really strong coordinated national and regional approach, and real strong accountability in the system, and really great examples of regions being able to tailor. So the Trailblazers are a good start, and if we wanted to sort of suit that up, it's definitely looking to the Dutch for the lessons there. The second thing I'd say is they have a really strong technical and vocational education system, and employer buy-in and involvement really right from the go within education and all the way through into the skills system, employment system, labour market policy, and so on and so forth. So young people just have stronger pathways into those routes, opportunities earlier on to get good experience with employers during their education. And again, we know that the evidence base says that really matters. And then the final thing I'd highlight is that they've just been really good at setting ambition, and ambition that has endured across different, the whole political spectrum, different sort of political parties. They've set a really ambitious target and they've worked towards that. And it's something that we hope to see government in the future adopt. I mean, at Youth Futures Foundation, we've talked about, actually, let's go for it. Let's say that we want to be the best in the OECD by 2050. Let's have that goal to match them, because creating that ambition drives action.
It absolutely does, and Youth Employment UK are delighted to stand beside YFF on calling for that ambition. for me, one NEET is too many. We'll never reduce it down to zero. There's no such panacea, but bringing it down to the all age rate, to that Netherlands rate, is absolutely where we should all be working to. And I think it's what we've heard today, as I sort of really do draw us to a close, is that this is really complicated. There is a lot of moving parts to both the policy landscape nationally, but what's happening in our regions. And of course, we're really focusing on some of the English policy here, but of course Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales also have activity and approaches to their own youth unemployment challenges. So we have to remember sort of beyond the borders as well. It's been a really fast-paced, kind of content-heavy webinar. You've had great questions. What I've just asked us to do from Youth Employment UK side is we are taking all of your questions and we will put up responses to them as we post the webinar. So we'll do a bit of a Q&A summary. So when you receive the webinar with the slides and the recording, we'll also make sure all of the questions were answered. So if we didn't get to you today, we will come back to those questions in the follow-up to this. It just leaves me to do a couple of thank yous. Firstly, a huge thank you to Youth Futures Foundation for partnering with us on the 2026 series that we're going to do together. As I've said to colleagues, we'll be coming out to all of you after this webinar to invite you to the future sessions that we'll be hosting. YFF and other colleagues from the Youth Employment Group have worked so closely on the Youth Guarantee policy over this last 18 months. We are certainly seeing some of the things really kind of coming to life that we've been talking about for a long time, and hope as we hear that we've got a government that are interested in tackling this, that will continue to do so through that partnership. So huge thanks to Youth Futures Foundation, the role that they are playing. Massive thanks to Beth, to Georgia and to Eva from the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority team. Lots of great local place-based stuff going on there. You can get in touch with Beth and Eva should you want to sort of post this webinar. Sorry we couldn't hear from Georgia, but huge thanks for turning up and trying to do that today. And a massive thanks to Emily. She knows how grateful we are to the work her and her colleagues are putting in and the hours on getting this right. So huge thanks to everybody. Before you all go, I've got a last request that actually where we get the best amount of youth voice insight and data from is indeed the annual Youth Voice Census, which is hosted by Youth Employment UK. It is a survey that goes out to 11 to 30-year-olds, regardless of their education, employment or training experience. We want to hear from young people. So whether you are connected to young people who are already working, maybe apprentices in your organisation or young people in your organisation, or if you are working with young people who are not yet in employment, education or training, we want to hear from them. So please do encourage young people in your networks to take part in this year's census. We do want to increase the number of participants from last year's record-breaking 8,000. So please do share this far and wide. Our marketing team at Youth Employment UK have got a huge amount of assets for you to put on your socials and in your newsletters. So a final note, if you want to get in touch with either Youth Employment UK team about anything you've heard today, a membership or the policy work that we do, or indeed learn more about the What Works element that Youth Futures Foundation have really brought to life through this session and through others, then you can get in touch and follow our socials. Thank you, everybody.